Mute your mics.
If I have my headphones on, should I still mute my mic?
Yes.
Yes. Can y'all both see me right now? Okay. Can you hear me now? Awesome. Hi, this is Fabiola. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Aerocene Project, Return to the Sun and Wind. This is a project of the East to West project that is graciously being funded by Alternate Roots, as well as the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to be online with us, be connected, and for supporting the work of your artists, media makers, movers, and shakers. My name is Fabiola Torralba, and I am introducing this workshop. I'm going to give you just a couple of pointers about what we are experimenting with today. First of all, I recognize that I am speaking in English and that not everybody communicates in English. Um, we hope to be able to offer a translated version of this recording after the live stream is completed. We are currently communicating through the Facebook Aerocene Project Return to the Sun and Wind page. So if you have any comments or questions throughout this process, please post under the discussion board. And if you can hear me and you are on the Facebook event page, write me a note. Just want to see if this is possible. Hmm. So it looks like there's a couple of questions here. Maybe some people are having a hard time finding the link. In case you are, what you'll want to do is go to the Aerocene Project Return to the Sun and Wind event page that is scheduled for today. And if you don't see that there, I am right now going to share the deceleration link, and maybe that's part of the issue. Maybe we have the link through deceleration, but not on the actual event page. So I'm about to post the deceleration live page on my timeline, where you'll get to see my big old head there. And now I'm going to share it in the East to West page. Hope that I can figure this out. Oh. And then I'm going to see if I can share this page link to the event page, if that's at all possible. Oh, I appreciate the comments. I'm seeing some people are already engaging with us. Thank you. And thank you for your patience. This is definitely not my forte. Oh, and hearts. How cute. Keep the love pouring. Okay. So it looks like we have, from what's happening on my screen, we have 17 people who are watching. I will try my best again to keep up with what we've got going on here. In case we get disconnected, please use the Facebook event page to share your questions, your comments, your concerns, and we will definitely respond as soon as possible. I'm going to do one more thing because I know that this is challenging for even myself here. So I'm gonna look for the deceleration link and see if I can share it on the event page. I don't exactly know how to do that. There's my head talking on the side. So weird. Okay. I want to be gracious and ask if somebody knows how to share the link on the event page, if you would not mind doing that for us, as we are figuring it out here. Kenneth likes a video that I shared. Yay. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the deceleration live stream link to the Facebook event page. Oh, can kind of see who's watching on deceleration. And the thing about these gadgets is that, you know, we're sharing internet and lots of other energy sources. I'm not going to tell you how many cords I've got running up on my table right now, but this is definitely showing me how much energy it costs to try to be accessible through these online platforms. So just to amuse you, as my internet is catching up here, I've got a laptop to see the Facebook page. I also have a iPad to be able to see all of the presenters that we'll be sharing today. And I also have my phone that I'm on standby with. I've already gotten some text messages from folks saying that they can't find the link. And I've got 2 extra long cords. Everything's plugged in. And headphones and an extra battery pack. So, how do we stay connected during these times, and stay connected in a way that is not encouraging our use of more energy, and that is also challenging us to stay connected with the actual world? Aside from the technologies that we've created, there is the technologies that already exist, the technologies of flight, of the birds, of singing, of the trees, of communication channels that run through roots and root systems, and the air that carries messages and spreads seeds, and all of the other itty bitty living things such as ants and worms, and all of those technologies are equally valid. And I just want to acknowledge that as we are trying to learn how to work with this medium, that we know that it is not necessarily the most accessible. And I'm just waiting for my internet to load here. Oh, post requires approval. Of course. um, okay, so gonna attempt to share this last post here so that anybody that is not following deceleration or doesn't have me as a friend can hopefully see it if my internet catches up to load. Okay, and it's taking a bit of time, so I apologize. Okay, so while that is loading, let's go ahead and keep moving forward with the program. And I'm kind of looking at the world here with like four eyes. I feel like a spider, and maybe that's another spider was also trying to teach us. You have to see through multiple lenses. So, um, okay. So, just to tell you a little bit about who I am, my name is Fabiola Ochoa Torralba. I was born in Acapulco, Guerrero, and I was raised in San Antonio, Texas, also known as Yanaguana. I am a dance maker. I'm an art maker, a teacher, a facilitator that comes with a background in cultural organizing, grassroots political activism, and that really works at the intersection of arts and engagement. I think I'm always asking myself, how can dance, performance, how can arts be applicable to real people's lives and experiences, and how can we use them as a way to create platforms that facilitate engagement, dialogue, consciousness raising through a social justice lens. So thank you so much for embarking on this experiment with us. My Facebook page has frozen. We'll see if it pops up in a bit. And I apologize to everyone that is trying to look for me on this internet web page. Okay, so the East to West Project is an initiative that I hope will continue into the future past this year. So far, what we have planned as part of the program is a 6-month presenter series. And the presenter series, first really honoring the work of local activists, artists, cultural workers, historians, people that are already a part of the conversation of how are we all interrelated, how are we all connected to each other's experiences, and specifically experiences that center the cultural expressions, the politics, and histories of descendants of the African diaspora and the interconnections between Indigenous, Latinx, and Black communities. The purpose of this initiative is to facilitate opportunities for critical engagement that foster cross-cultural awareness, social political analysis, and solidarity movement building. The public and any participants are invited in a discourse that hopefully will broaden any notions of race, ethnicity, identity that we may have, bring with us, that have been imposed onto us in a monthly series of workshops, lectures, film screenings, and performances. This year's programming will feature, again, artists from San Antonio, Texas, historians, cultural workers who explore Black presence in space, as we will learn about today, African American community archives, transcontinental experiences of Blackness, Black and Brown displacement, Afro-Mexican feminist praxis, and theories of established power. All very, very big, heavy words. Just to give you a little bit about what propelled me to this initiative. As I said earlier, I was born in Guerrero, Mexico. Guerrero, Mexico is one of two states that make up what is known as La Costa Chica. And La Costa Chica is a region that is known as one of the major Afro-Mexican communities, hubs, hotspots in Mexico. Afro Mexico right now in Movimiento are currently fighting for the recognition of their history, their culture, their identity, their racial experiences. So one thing that we can celebrate at this moment is that in Mexico, people can now self-identify as Afro-descendant, Afro-Mexicano, negro, negra, etc. And that is a step towards not just recognizing the identities, histories, cultures of Afro-Mexicans, but also their needs as a community that has been historically marginalized and that continues to experience the effects of what it is to be Black, what it is to live on the coast, what it is to also be of mixed race or mixed descendancies, or to be of a community who is not acknowledged or recognized. And we're in a very critical and also moment of possibility because they are in the public view right now. We also have an opportunity to lend our support as US-based people, as people that live in the US and in a country where a lot of resources come from other places. It's one of my desires to encourage solidarity movement building with Afro Mexico, specifically of La Costa Chica, and to acknowledge our role in the displacement of other communities, Black, Indigenous, Afro-descendant, mixed race, all of these words, right? So I'm constantly asking myself, who sits on the margins? And what is my responsibility to these communities? So thank you for joining us for this presentation, and hopefully you will find it inspiring in some way, or will leave with many, many other questions, which I invite. So our presenter today is Crystal Paul, and Crystal Paul is an artist and an aspiring engineer who uses technological knowledge to take up space in an academic and professional environment that marginalizes and dismisses her as a queer person of color. The Aerocene Project Return to the Sun and Wind workshop will encourage participants to think like engineers and transform an everyday item into a dynamic, functional hot air balloon. Through manipulation of leftover plastic grocery bags, we will draw awareness to the contamination of the environment and how this compounds on marginalized communities already suffering the effects of climate change. The goal is to acknowledge our consumption and the invisibility of those who are impacted by our waste, including coastal and island communities. So we're going to call Crystal Paul onto the screen, and if you are sitting in your chairs or sitting with your loved ones, you can do like a jazz hand high fives, or you can just clap, or you can send us some hearts. Let us know that you are present with us.
Thank you so much, Fabiola. Like she said, I am an artist and aspiring engineer. A few years ago, I did get my bachelor's of fine arts, and I worked in the arts industry for about 8 years, and I truly loved it. I thought it was exciting and just really beautiful to be on the cutting edge of working with artists that are just making something new every single day. And I had an amazing time. But the times changed, and I had to change with it, and I needed to become the primary breadwinner for my family, and the organization I was working with was a nonprofit, and that made it difficult for me to establish that, so I went back to school. um, the plan was to get my associates and duck, because I appreciate academia for what it is, but it's not my home. It's not my favorite thing to do. And I did choose something that I felt was sort of an innate skill set with technology, and I wanted to work in that and kind of go with the flow in that instance. It's funny how plans change. So the first inkling that I had that my plans would change was when I heard about a program called NCOS. And this is called National Community College Aerospace Scholars. It's a 2-month online program, and it culminates with this big project where you spend 1 week in person at one of the NASA facilities. And this was exciting. I mean, I had just started going back to school, and as an artist, space was something I always appreciated and loved, but I was no artist like Trevor Paglin or something that was making space-based artwork. It was something that I appreciated from afar. And I actually participated in this program. I only needed 6 credits of science, so I was very, very new. And as soon as I got to the NASA Center, it was so inviting. It was beyond what I imagined. I had no idea that I could find an institution like this that said they wanted me. It's not that they want students or they want people of color. They said that they wanted me specifically. And so that really motivated me. That fall, I decided to go ahead and look at the NASA internship opportunities for a full internship. And I found a unicorn. I saw a program that was looking for someone that did have the tech know-how, but they also wanted someone with an art sensibility. And I'm like, that's exactly me. And I applied. And that next spring I was at NASA. And it was so perfect, which is kind of funny because I started at the beginning of a government shutdown. So the circumstances were complicated, but once I was actually at NASA working in the program, it was incredible. It was exactly what you think of when you think of working with NASA. Just having meetings with people who have regions of space named after them. And the program that I was working with was called SOFIA, which is an acronym. Stands for the Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy. And it's essentially a telescope on a plane. And my group of interns were the first to ever ride on SOFIA. So I actually touched the stratosphere. I'm basically an astronaut, y'all. Just kidding. But these circumstances really gave me this incredible perspective. And let me talk about that too. So NASA was founded in 1958, and all of the research, all of the exploration, everything that they've discovered, liquid water in space, oxygen, finding all of that together and supporting an active biosphere that promotes all kinds of life is so rare and so precious. And that's something that was really special to me to come away with. And that's really kind of what I view the world through now. Like, that's a lens that has changed what I see and think of. And when Fabiola introduced me to the Aerocene Project, I knew that this was a like-minded kind of perspective. And we can go ahead and play that video.
Dear Sun, spiders, earth, air, cosmic webs, mountains, vicuñas, clouds, and bacteria. Humans have always dreamed of flying, but today this dream has become a nightmare. beso.
Bueno, es así.
Okay, I'm gonna pull it, walk around. And try and pull it in. Here for a sufficient period.
The Aerocene Project inspires people all over the world to interrupt their regular day-to-day and think about their impact on the environment while reducing pollution and returning to nature. They want us to think about the world around us and how to make it better for everyone. This project takes an ordinary object like plastic bags and turns it into something extraordinary, and at the same time, removing this common pollutant from the waste cycle. Okay, so I'm not used to my big old head being on screen. Like I mentioned, I am an engineering student, and this past semester I worked on a project that researched really these alternative fuels, and I was a bit used to kind of these other ways of thinking, like understanding the cost of carbon emissions and the difficulty of these new systems, and how to connect a fuel cell to a vehicle, or how to access alternative fuels like hydrogen, and even the cost of like the mining for lithium batteries. But I really appreciated Aerocene's collaborative effort on promoting environmental awareness on a global scale. And like I felt when I was touching the stratosphere last year, that this is our one planet, and this is what we've got. So overall, I want to start with a quote, I guess. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step by Lao Tzu. And my first step on this journey to change global climate is working with the Aerocene Project and to remove bags from the waste cycle. And I have a few stats. I know y'all don't want to lecture, and I'm definitely not a professor. I don't want to lecture to you, but just to really start with a baseline of of what we all know. So bags were introduced in supermarkets in 1977. And that was only 40 years ago, and there are 4 trillion bags used worldwide. And in the States, that's 14 billion bags. And since this is a plastic product, of course, this has an oil cost. So that's 12 million barrels of oil. And when you think about oil and natural gas and coal and relying so heavily on these fossil fuels, you know that we're creating so much more of a dependence on carbon dioxide from these fossil fuels, from forestry, and even with agriculture, we're releasing methane and nitrous oxide, and these greenhouse gases are completely trapping heat in our atmosphere. It's like thickening the Earth's blanket, and we're just constantly warming up. Almost every year in the past 10 years has been the hottest year on record, and it's just not sustainable. And a lot of these gases, they once they're in the atmosphere, they stay there for thousands of years. I don't know if you've ever been to Mexico City or LA or some of the more industrial areas of China where they have that really horrible smog. That's a concentration of those greenhouse gases, but they eventually disperse evenly around the entire globe. And this is something that we need to address. And on top of the fossil fuel costs, plastic bags have another problem. They take, almost as long to break down. And in the meantime, they break into smaller pieces called microplastics. And I'm sure most of you guys have heard about how dangerous that is in our environment. Over 100,000 marine animal deaths every year. If you were to take a square mile of the ocean and set it out, there'd be 46,000 pieces of plastic in it. And this is what we need to prevent. It's not sustainable, and it's not healing our world, it's hurting it. So let's break it down. Let's bring it home. And you're probably thinking, what can I do about it? And you're right. I mean, there's not anything one person can do alone to combat this. But like I said, it takes one step. And if we all make one step collectively, that's what changes everything. So back in 2016, 195 nations, including the US, signed the Paris Agreement, which was going to address our global average temperatures and commit to reducing our greenhouse emissions and dropping our average global temperature to 2 degrees below the pre-industrial limit, 2 degrees Celsius, excuse me. And our current administration did withdraw in 2017, but luckily our mayor, Ron Nierenberg, joined in with the American Cities Climate Challenge and developed the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan in 2019. And so that particular plan focuses a lot on reduction. So one of the number one ways of energy usage and consumption in San Antonio is building energy. Think about it. Like today is a pretty temperate day. Do you still have your air conditioner on? Do you still, even if it's not running, is the power still used on it? You could open windows and let the air breeze through instead. And so one of the options for the city was also to address that, to really focus on improving and adapting city buildings and buildings all over the city, and buildings all over the city, including city buildings. Another option was to invest into renewable energy instead of fossil fuels that release so many pollutants. And then the third option was decreasing individual vehicle use. So improving our transit options and creating options that, like electronic buses that don't rely on natural gas or gasoline. So another way for you guys to reduce your personal energy consumption would be to really reduce your driving. Think about the coronavirus right now. A lot of you may have gone on a bike ride instead of driven somewhere just to get out a little bit longer. Maybe you can incorporate a ride your bike to work day, or take the public transit to the grocery store instead of driving your own vehicle. Or if no one's home, you can turn your air conditioner up a few degrees and turn it back down to a comfortable level when someone's present in the house, just to decrease that energy consumption. Another step you can take is by recycling. Our San Antonio waste management is really impressive. And on your blue bin, they already list what you can put in your bin. You can recycle glass, paper, plastic products in San Antonio, and that's fantastic. And on top of that, there's a lot of options in town. One of my favorite restaurants on the St. Mary's Strip, La Botanica, offers sorted waste options. So I can compost my waste paper products and recycle my aluminum. So maybe you can talk to your favorite haunts on the Strip, or your favorite restaurants you go to see what they're doing to contribute, because it takes all of us. Another step you can do is to reuse. I really like to use my to-go mug. I make coffee almost every day. I need it to live. And I don't want to buy a paper cup every single day. So I always have my to-go carry, and I have reusable bags for my sandwiches. It's like a plastic-lined sandwich bag, plastic-lined fabric sandwich bag that you just wash and you can reuse it. And what we're all here for today, I mean, the plastic bags at the grocery store, you can reuse those. I have pets, so a lot of times if I don't bring my reusable bags, I try and take those and reuse it for my pet waste, so I can not create more waste out of that. And states like California, or even here in Mexico, nearby, and in China, they have a complete plastic bag ban. So they're reusing their old plastic bags. They're coming up with new plastic bags. They're coming up with alternative ways to really conserve. And it's just these small steps that are easy to introduce, that don't take a lot of work, don't take extra effort. And that's how you make these big differences. So, speaking of using bags, let's go ahead and do a demo of how to contribute to the Aerocene Project. So maybe you can do this with me, or there's actually in the event page for the East to West Aerocene Project, there's a flyer for this. So I'm going to go ahead and do this demo. Give me a second to set up. All right. So you start with cutting off the arms of this bag. Super simple. And I like to hold on to them just in case. Sometimes the bag will have a small hole in it, or something that I want to patch up. And so you go along the sides and just cut all the way down. And it doesn't have to be neat or pretty, because it all gets taped together, and we're all working and combining all of these into one. so it doesn't have to be perfect. I know a lot of my artist friends are streaming with me. It's like, let it go, relax. It's a process. So we're just cutting all along the edges. And at the end, we end up with 2 plastic squares. And we just tape it together. We overlap the edges here. And I have my handy dandy tape like I was prepared to do this demo. Put a little piece of tape down. And you combine it. And see, this is how it starts. And I like to make small squares and combine them all into one giant side. And that's how it works. And you can see here, this one actually has a little hole on it. So let's do a patch. I have a piece of tape. I do a little patch over the hole. And then I cut a little bit from my strap that was left over. And I go on the inside where the adhesive tape is. And I just stick it just so when it's all folded together and compiled into one, it doesn't stick together. And that's how that works. And you just keep combining and combining and cutting until you get a big square.
So this is Fabiola, and I'm going to continue with the instructions on how to prepare the bag for just I just wanted to note that I can't see myself on the screen. But while you're waiting to see my big old head again, ooh, there she is. Yay! Well, I wanted to just take a moment and listen to the sound of the bag because it's quite pleasant. Okay, calming down. So I like hearing elders talk about their stories, and one of the stories that I always remember is the sound of rain falling on tin roofs. And it's kind of rainy outside right now in San Antonio, Yanaguana. I'm not sure what the climate looks like. Where you are listening in from. But I really appreciate just the sound of these bags. And maybe this is something we can continue to play with. I can't see how live I am or in the moment I am, but I wanted to show a trick about how else to break up these bags. I hope that you can see. So what I'm doing right now is I'm stretching. Put your finger in the hole, bloop, 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 and then you pull it from the other end there, and then you straighten it off on this other end here. Just pull and tug, and then run your finger again in the hole, run it down, and pull. And this is kind of a fast way for me to prepare the bag. I'm just going to cut the bunny ears here. I think it's better if it's on a flat surface, but I'm not sure what you can see. I will use my leg. Can you see my leg? So I'm just going to cut the bunny ears here. And then I'm going to cut the seam, which kind of seems like really it's already, together. Why would you cut what's holding it together? But watch this. You cut this seam and run it all the way through. And these pieces can be reused. I don't know, Ama. Well, this one broke, but we can tape it or glue it. Like if it could be a rope or something. So save those pieces. And then when you open it up, like it's one full kind of set. So that's just another trick for cutting the bags. So putting this away. And I'm going to show you how I use the iron to seam these babies together. So I'm going to lift. I'm watching myself live on Facebook live stream, and I'm about 20 seconds behind myself. I can see my past. Trippy. So what you do to glue these together is you take one end of a bag like this, and then you put another end of a bag right over it like this. And of course I'm doing this all on a flat surface, but for the sake of you being able to see what's going on here, just make a small lip like so. And you can see through the bag and see how much of a lip you have. This is maybe about 1/2 inch. It can go smaller. I'm a little bit, I don't think the width of the lip matters, but I think maybe 3/4 to 1/2 inch is good. So you get a sense of how to overlap that. So the step before this is that you actually have to have paper on the bottom or on the top, and on the top, I'm sorry. So here I have a piece of wax paper. You can use tissue paper. And I've already ironed this one down. I wanted you to see what it looks like when I pull it apart. So this is a piece of wax paper on top and a piece of wax paper on the bottom. Lots of paper, lots of plastic. Maybe we just like the sound. That's okay too. Nice. You're going to grab your iron. Any iron will do. I'm using just a regular $10 iron. I've had it for many years. And I have it on the nylon setting. So I recommend not going any higher than the nylon setting, because what happens when you try to iron these pieces together is that the heat like frizzles the plastic and makes it disappear. I don't know the science of it, I'm sorry, but the heat makes the plastic disappear. And so if you have it on too high, then you lose your material. So let me see if I can put this on the table here. Here we go, maneuvering with technology. Here it is, on the table, flat surface. Do not burn my headset. Iron over. Over, just like so. And you want to, I think, give yourself 10 seconds of a press. So 10 seconds very slow. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So wherever the heat is, that's what it's going to grab onto. So the tricky thing about this part is trying to channel the heat to only the part that you want to be glued, because everything else will be affected by the heat. This is definitely something that takes a little bit of time. I like it because it doesn't require using as much tape, but if you don't want to move as slow, or you don't have an iron, or you don't have electricity, which might be the reality for many of us and is the reality for many people currently, that might not be an option. There is a suggestion on the Aerocene page to use a magnifying glass. I have not gotten that adventurous, but it is an option. And why not? Some of us have all of the time in the world. And I never got to play with the magnifying glass when I was a kid. I would appreciate that exercise even now. So if you have kiddos, why not take the time? Because they can. So I want to show you what it's like to pull these apart, because it's best after you iron it to give it a little bit of time to cool down and then pull the pieces apart. Because if you do it while it's still warm, well, they're still warm. They're still learning how to separate. And for whatever reason, I also like to blow on them as I'm pulling the wax paper apart from the pieces of plastic bag. And there's one of my hairs caught in there. Yay! So here we go, blowing. All right, one is off. See that? You can see the lip a little bit there. Cool, it works. It's stuck together. You can see where there's some gaps there that didn't quite make it. I think it's okay as long as the main part is congealed. Then take the bag here and slowly pull it away again. And it's tricky because, again, all heat, right, affects all parts of the bag. And so what I've found with this process is that you might actually tear the bag as you are gluing it. You might accidentally make holes in it, and you might actually tear it as you're trying to pull it apart. So it's quite a process in that you really have to hone in on some details. It's kind of nice to be forced to move slow. It can be like its own meditation. And just like watching it come apart is something, right? Just being very careful. See, there's a little part that got snagged there. Being very careful with all of the parts of this plastic. It's really interesting because in being forced to, take care, it's almost like I have a different kind of appreciation for these bags now. So we use them every day and we take them for granted, and they're so delicate and yet so resilient. So I've got some nice texture here that is probably not good for our bag, our giant balloon that we are aiming to build. So you can see these holes, right? These are the holes that occur usually because you've got the iron on too long, it's too hot, or you've got it on over the plastic for too long, or you're putting too much pressure in conjunction with the movement of your arm gliding over it if you choose to glide. So it's a process. I'm going to bring it in closer so you can see it a little bit better, maybe, hopefully. Okay, so this is a long piece that I've started to put together, and I don't know, maybe you can play with it if you get frustrated with yourself. It can be a boa. Ooh, you can do an improvisational dance where you're like trying to keep it up with different limbs of your body. So multiple uses for this. And just before we move on with the presentation, I want to show you what, yes, trash bag fashion, what it looks like when things go differently than planned. So this piece right here, I thought, well, maybe why don't we just join two bags together, melt them into one another. And I was playing with the heat, and this one, it works. Like, it's two bags into each other, but we've got some nice holes over here. And because the heat was too high, like, it started like crunching up right underneath the heat over here. So I'm a very hot-headed person. I'm a heat person. I say that it's because I was born on the coast. It's probably not true, but I move with a lot of fire. So I appreciate this again because it forces you to move slow, think about the process, lean into it, take your time. And again, all of these, details about how much pressure, the heat level, and how quickly you move the iron across, if you do, all of that matters, all of those details. So here's this. And then here's the first baby that I made. And it's a little bit cleaner. But again, you can see along the sides of that overlap there that there's a little bit of sacrifice in that. There's some holes. And for the making of a balloon, we do not want holes. So, well, what do you do with these holes? Do you fill them up with tape? Do you use nail polish? Dancers that wear tights use nail polish to keep their hose from running. So that's an option. So thinking about how to reuse, but using less energy, not using more supplies, it's a difficult question, but I appreciate, thinking about it. This one right here is a piece that I patched up. So there's the merging, right, of two pieces, and you see not so much of a straight line, a little winded, and then you see these like other areas where I've literally like taken a piece of plastic from the scraps and have just used the iron to kind of glue these holes or fill these holes in. So, interesting. Very interested in seeing like what else can be done with these bags. So these are the three pieces. And of course, what you are left with are more pieces. We've got to figure out what to do with. So I appreciate this because it shows you, all that is involved in the handling, in the making, and the repurposing, and also, nothing ever goes away. My father describes himself as a garbiologist. He did for many years worked for a private trash company that would basically go around and pick up the giant dumpsters where we put all of our food waste and trash, and mostly for businesses and such. And a couple of times he took me out with him to go to a landfill. And so I, was raised very early on with the image of landfill and having a clear understanding that our trash goes into these piles. What I had told myself as a little girl is that, or what I had imagined like would happen is that this trash would disintegrate, um, and that the trash would go away after being underneath the ground for many, many years. And it wasn't actually until recently, well, maybe about 10 years ago, that I realized that the trash never goes away. And so it never goes away. And so now, even more with that realization, I think about all of the little pieces, the minute pieces that we maybe think aren't a big deal. We just flick it off our hands. Think about those piles of garbage, and also having traveled through the Costa Chica, Guerrero, and Oaxaca, seeing that there are less resources in those regions where there is trash services available. So folks will usually burn their trash, or they will leave it in a pile. They will create their own piles. And so walking through the land, you see piles of trash and piles of trash and piles of trash. And it's not because people don't care, it's because they don't have the services to remove or to contain, find new things to do with them. So it never goes away. And our trash in the US is definitely being exported to other countries like Mexico. So with more attention, I hope that we can think about what to do with all of these pieces and scraps. So before we move on into a kind of Q&A process, I want to check in and see so far, folks that are watching us in the internet world, what are you hearing so far? What are you feeling so far? What questions do you have? So this is an opportunity for us to just, if you have any technical questions, what is this? What exactly are you doing with this? I don't get this whole balloon thing. Why my bags? Or any other questions that you have about the presentation so far. And I unfortunately can't see questions, so I'm going to count on Greg and Marisol if you see anything that we can respond to.
Oh, yeah.
Hello.
How's our audio? Good?
Can you see us, Fabiola?
We've been popping up some questions along the way as you've been going, and not many technical questions.
Actually, there's one.
Oh, okay.
There's one question that somebody who joined the broadcast while you were ironing, Anayance asks, I'm sorry, I didn't see the title, so I'm trying to guess what she's trying to do. So maybe if you can just kind of recap what you're working on.
Yeah, so the bags. Well, Crystal has this beautiful vision of creating one of these giant self-floating balloons made out of our plastic bags. And so the idea is that going through this activity by yourself, with your friends, with your family, is a way to talk about our consumption of plastic bags and how that impacts other communities. And the goal is to encourage these conversations to take place, and also to encourage any of you all watching right now or watching later to be a part of our big dream of making this giant self-floating balloon. Crystal, do you want to add anything more to that?
Sure. again, it's like you mentioned, a really great way to be conscious of what you do and what you're using, as well as being mindful of taking steps out of that process, taking trash out of the waste cycle, and making a better earth for everyone. I saw one of the questions was for it lifting a person. There are two kind of ways to go about it, and for the plastic bags like this, it gets too heavy before it gets to the right size to lift a whole person. So it'd be smaller than the ones in the Pacha Aerocene, but still quite large, still like 6 by 6 meters, so very, very big.
Go ahead.
Sure. All right. And please continue just to type your questions for Crystal and Fabiola as we continue talking. But did we want to move now to maybe asking you, Crystal, some questions, just having a little more in-depth discussion? And I should mention too, my name is Marisol. I'm the co-editor of Deceleration, and this is Greg Harmon, who's also co-editor of Deceleration, and he's also...
And we have all the toilet paper, so I don't know if we can build with that or not, but that's what's behind this.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay. I thought it was like printer paper. I thought it was like The Office.
It's supposed to be toilet paper.
So, yeah, this has been a really, really great workshop and presentation from both of y'all, and we just thank you so much for letting us live stream you. Originally, this was going to be a in-person workshop, and then of course we had to switch to this format, to online format. But I think it's coming. I think the work y'all put into it has come together really well, and thank you so much for the work that you do. The thing that drew our attention to your event originally, and that we thought was so interesting, was just the way that you do make all of these links between like all of these different issues and all of these different spheres, like, you know, drawing connections between climate change and like what Fabiola was saying about the invisibility of waste, that we don't really think about where waste goes. The fate of the oceans, the importance of uniting the arts with the sciences, the need to challenge kind of the gendered and racial exclusions of the sciences as well. Can you maybe, Crystal, can you talk more about, and you already kind of talked a little bit in your intro, but can you kind of go more into depth about just the importance of bringing together like these very different fields of knowledge and why that's so important, both to this project and maybe just even like in your own life?
Yeah, absolutely. I know for me personally, like my entire existence is intersectional. I grew up in a military family, and it was just normal to see people of all different races, all different backgrounds everywhere we went, because the military is sort of that mandatory melting pot. But I also really needed that when I got older and my mother retired. I had this broadened perspective, and now, like as an adult, I've been in San Antonio for so long. It's just something that I brought into my life because it was normal. Because I was used to everyone being different and having different opinions and coming together to collaborate or work together or whatever we're doing. And as far as professionally, one of the biggest things that I say is that art and engineering are the same. It's the same ideation, it's the same innovation, and you really, like, the only difference is maybe being a little bit more precise with the numbers. And if that's what's keeping you away from engineering, don't let it keep you away. I go to tutoring. I use a lot of resources to make it through my studies, and I need it. And I think it's important that we demystify these things, because math can be challenging, but it's interesting and beautiful and artistic. And art can be challenging, but it's structured and organized and has this capacity to change the world around you, just like engineering. So
yeah, definitely. And then sort of relatedly, you know, I think in the description for this event, I really love the way that you talked about how as a Black queer woman in the field of engineering, you use technology to take up space. And can you talk about how this project, or even any other project that you've worked on as an engineer, as an engineering student, has allowed you to do that idea of taking up space? Where'd her sound go? Is it on mute?
Mm-mm. Tell her. Hey, Crystal?
We're having some difficulties with the
Crystal,
sound.
can you check your mic?
There you are, I think.
Oh, was it muted the whole time?
We hear you now.
Okay.
Sorry, you might have to start over, sorry.
Okay. Let me go ahead and tell a story about INCOS. It was from my bio, the Community College Aerospace Scholars, and I was 100% daunted by actually going to NASA, and it was the week before my flight, and I told my spouse at the time I wasn't going to go because there was nothing that I could bring. Like I was enrolled in my 6 hours of STEM at the time, so I had no background of any sort of engineering, and I just felt like I couldn't contribute anything. And so I got that, and I ended up going, and like I mentioned before, it was an amazing experience, and I brought a lot to the team, and I won an award from that, and was able to come back and apply for a full internship, and I would have missed out on so much of my life now if I had succumbed to that fear and like let my assumptions about what math and engineering and what NASA overall is like. So I really try and be present and be big about everything I do. This past semester, I was a team manager for the hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, and now I'm working on this project with Fabiola, and I just really don't want other people to think like, oh, well, there's no one that looks like me or no one that thinks like me. I wouldn't be welcome in this space. So I'm trying to be present and make it easier.
Yeah, thank you. Another question that we had, you know, you mentioned also in the description for the event that really you'd like for this project to shed light on the impacts of climate change, specifically on coastal communities. And we wanted to know a little bit more about whether those communities are home to you, and if so, how have you seen them altered, you know, in your lifetime by the impacts of climate change and pollution?
Yeah, absolutely. I was, like I mentioned, a Navy brat when I was younger. So really, when I describe my hometown, I think I say the beach is my home, my hometown, because I wasn't anywhere long enough. But really, some of my first memories about going to the beach or going to explore marine culture were about the warnings, like when there was a red tide warning from algal blooms, or going to the aquarium. They had a rehabilitation area for a lot of the marine animals, and the only memory that I have of the aquarium, even though I went every summer, was an injured turtle that they were rehabilitating. And so I all of my memories really of the ocean and of the water are of the wildlife and the impact of humans on that wildlife. So now that I'm an adult and I'll go to the beach, it's, those shadowy pillars off the coast are, the oil rigs, or, having family in Houston and having family in Louisiana, and even my schoolmates' families on the coast. It's not just that they're in danger of flooding every time it rains. It's, Katrina or Rita or Harvey, and the danger of them losing. They have, a lot of them, lost parts of their livelihood and had to start over. So it's not these anonymous numbers in the news anymore. It's my family.
Yeah.
And I think, Fabiola, you also had some perspective, right? Go on.
Oh, Fabiola, can you check your mic and see if it's on mute? We can't hear you.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much. Yes, it's definitely something that I've also been noting of communities that live along the Costa Chica, Guerrero, and Mexico. These are communities that, aside from lacking basic infrastructure, such as sewage systems, roads, some electricity, some still clean water that can be obtained from a faucet. These are also communities that live along the coast. And so we're talking about waters, that are known, to kill, are strong enough to kill babies, young people, individuals who don't have swimming skills, and also waters that take down people's homes, every several years. And as climate change continues to impact these coastal communities, we see those impacts of these waters intensifying more and more and more. And I think something to note about these communities is that not only are they dealing with the environmental consequences of our consumption, but they're also dealing with racism, because many people that live along these margins, along these coasts, are descendants of the Black diaspora, or they're mixed race peoples that maybe have a harder time accessing jobs, accessing education, or who have languages that is not a part of the dominant language structure. So all of those issues intersect with how they are able to exist in their land, and how they're able to seek other opportunities to secure a future for themselves and their families. And I know that that is also the case for many other communities in the Caribbean. As an example, Puerto Rico, that we've heard a lot about in these past few years. And there are also other island communities that are experiencing these waves differently, and I think harder than those of us that don't live on these margins or on these islands. So for me, it's a very personal issue, as my family resides there. It's also a personal issue in terms of thinking about migration. What forces people to move? What displaces, entire communities? And what gets documented? I think something that I've learned about living along the coast is that it's hard. It's a different kind of different experience, in that in the U.S., for example, a lot of what gives you credit, for example, is documentation and writing. If you live in a coastal community where there's high humidity, and where the climate conditions are not contained in the same way that we experience them in the U.S., in that when you walk into your home, if you have a home or an apartment, you close the door and there's this automatic obstruction of air and bugs and all of what we share space with. But when you're living along the coast, where there's water, winds, waves, lots of bugs, things like photographs disintegrate, things like paper, documents, legal documents, are not preserved as well. And when you're talking about communities, especially who are barred access from these formal processes, either because of language or differences in literacy, then you have more circumstances to work through to not only prove your existence, but maybe also keep your land or be able to petition for a home, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, all of those issues relate to, people's invisibility, invisibility along the coast and on these islands, and specifically the invisibility of poor Afro-Indigenous, Afro-descendant, Black diaspora, Afro-Mexicanos. And as a US-based person, I feel that it's part of my responsibility to acknowledge that and to not participate in the displacement of our peoples.
I'm just going to give one of the earphones to you so you can join the conversation. Greg, were you able to hear what Fabiola was just saying?
A little bit.
Okay. She was talking about the invisibility of coastal peoples in Mexico, in the Costa Chica, and the Afro-Indigenous communities there. And really what I was thinking about was the transnational kind of like the transnational nature of environmental racism from the Gulf Coast down, all the way down to the coast of Mexico. And the way that those particular communities that are along the beaches are positioned as sacrifice zones. So that was one thing that I was thinking about. I don't know if you wanted to add anything or share anything or none of that. Okay. But the other thing I was just thinking about too is just jump from my own experience, because I was born in Corpus. I didn't live there very long after I was born there, but we would go back every summer, and it was really like this weird. I got this weird feeling when I realized as an adult, like, what some of the things that I observed as a kid, like in Corpus or on the beach, really were. Like, we would drive in and we would see the big
refineries.
Yeah, like the refineries with the lights and stuff. And I remember thinking, when as a child, like they looked so magical. And then growing up and realizing what those really were, or and this was probably, in the early 80s, before they, because I don't remember seeing this later when I would go to the beach, but tar on the beach. Tar would wash up from the ocean onto the beach, and when we were kids, it was like, oh, interesting, how fun, like, cool, what is this stuff? Like, we'd play with it, and then you grow up and you realize, like, what that really is. So I was just thinking about, like, I couldn't help but think about that when you were talking, Crystal, about like where you grew up and thinking of the beach as your home. Are y'all ready for some questions from the Q&A from folks that were typing in? Okay.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm going through.
And thank you to everyone for holding on. It's been a process, and thank you.
Okay, I'm just gonna go through and see. I'm gonna put this. This is just a thank you from Maria Requina Firmino Castillo. She says, it was inspiring, allowing me to imagine future technologies that lead to a different world than the one we have now. Thank you, Crystal, Fabiola, and Deceleration. And then Meredith McGuire has a question. Do you have an image of previous balloons Crystal has made?
Oh. I might. Let me check and see if I have it. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
Do you want to pitch one to Fabiola?
Oh, okay, let's see. All right. Okay, let's see. This one, I can't find, it doesn't have an option to add it to
It's been up on the screen, so you can read it.
I'll just read it. It's from Jerica Miranda Pellecer, who says, I have a whole new respect for plastic bags. Really appreciate the opportunity to hear the sounds of plastic and to hear a bit about when plastic bags came into existence and the impact it has on animals and the ecosystem. I have read a bit, but taking the time to, and then it cuts off, but just wanted to add that to the conversation.
New comment.
And then, oh, actually there's more from her. She says, I'm going to send this activity to youth and families that I work with. Hopefully when we come together, we can put it all together and create a flying balloon, inspiring me to do a whole project.
Yay!
Yeah.
That's great.
Did you find any pictures?
I have a smaller scale model in my car.
Ooh.
But I will upload pictures of it.
Cool.
Or if I can get a video of it, maybe when it's not pouring down rain, into the event. So follow that event still.
Cool. I have one more final question, if that's okay. And it's more just sort of like a process question or a technical, crafty question. But have you completed a whole balloon yet that is operational and that can, like, is your goal to be able to lift off?
Yes, that is the ultimate goal, to have a liftoff with it. I have a smaller scale model. Like I mentioned, it's about 1 meter by 1 meter, so it's not as big as the ones in the video for sure. So, and it also, physics-wise, it's a little bit too heavy for its size, but it can still take in air, and I have been trying to do some test runs and playing with how much wind it can handle and how much sun it needs. So I'm still kind of figuring out the mechanics of it. But hopefully we can get a demo and see what happens.
Very cool. Thanks to both of you very much, and we'll continue to, please send us updates as you complete steps along the path to achieving liftoff. And
I think Fabiola was gonna kind of close out. If there's not more from the community here, did you want to offer some closing thoughts, Fabiola?
Well, I wanted to just read a little bit a part of the Aerocene Manifesto. I just love manifestos. I love language.
Awesome.
And it's a little bit long-winded, but I also love people reading to me. So maybe this will appeal to individuals that want to just be read to. So this is Aerocene Manifesto, Aeronauts Unite, which can be found on the Aerocene webpage at aerocene.org. You can find it there. And I'm gonna go to 0 point called Towards an Epoch Free from Borders, Free from Fossil Fuels. And I will just read a section of it, or maybe the whole thing. So it says, while fossil fuel-based industries continue their attempts to colonize other planets, the air, this common interface of terrestrial life, continues to be compromised. Carbon emissions fill the air, particulate matter floats inside our lungs, while electromagnetic radiation envelops the earth, dictating the tempo of surveillance capitalism. This control, held by the few, enacts the suffering of the multi-species, many in the current era of ecological crisis. A different epoch is needed, one which radically upturns fossil narratives of materiality and re-examines the inscribed notions of property and properties, human and inhuman, of production and subjection. How would breathing feel in a post-fossil fuel era? How can we challenge the dominance of dispossessing geopolitical forces and overcome the extractive approach to Earth and the wealth of life it provides for? Together, we call for this new epoch, which has been named Aerocene. I will let you read the rest because it is pretty lengthy, but it's a lively document that you can find that will help to give context about why trash bags and why this giant floating balloon and why reimagine how we use technology and interact with existing technologies. So with that, I just want to share about ways that you can stay connected to this project, East to West project, and specifically to this initiative of the East to West project, which is in partnership, in collaboration, in solidarity with Aerocene and all of the communities that we've mentioned, island, coastal, Black, Indigenous, all of our relations. So we will be following up, and if we can kind of just show that screen a little bit, that way those folks that have access to being able to see this information online can take a look.
Were you asking for the credit screen, Sabi?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think the mics are open now. I can back this up even. Hold on. Okay, go for it. Thank you.
Make sure her mic is not muted.
Okay, I think the mics are open now. I can back this up even. Hold on. Okay, go for it. Thank you.
Is her mic on mute?
Are you talking to me?
Mm-hmm. Is her mic?
Are folks picking up? I want to make sure folks are able. Can anyone give me a thumbs up if you can hear Fabiola? I know my mic is hot, but I'm not sure yours is. So I want to make sure to get that information out. Anybody online, can you send us a note? You're hearing it? Is that a thumbs up? You're hearing Fabiola right now? Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna go back. I wasn't getting it. Okay, go for it. I'm gonna mute. Okay, I'm sorry. Folks are saying they cannot hear you. They can hear me. So maybe we let the credits roll and follow up. Is that okay? We're gonna put the credits up, and I just want to say real quick, joining in on Yes, you don't even know yet what's happening. But I do. I just want to say you guys are amazing, and this is um, um, uh, just getting to know Crystal just remotely, and we wanted to do this. Marisol and myself wanted to do this, just reading about what the presentation was going to be. We were pretty excited, and we were going to come out there, and then obviously life has changed, right? Life is suddenly very, very different, and I think people we've been talking about and expecting these kinds of major shocks, across economic, social, political systems. And here is one. It may not be the one that was top of mind for me or for some other folks. But what we're seeing through this is it uncovers it takes the mask off of all the failings of our current system that many of us, probably most of us on this call or on this broadcast were aware of. And so what we'd hoped to do with deceleration and why we wanted to move this forward and create this space is part of our way of trying to ensure that the community and the movement continues pushing forward in spite of the fact we've been sent back into our homes, right? And the political operatives continue to function without us if we allow them to. And so the more we can come into spaces, the spaces that we can come together and share this kind of visions, plastic or no, I think the undergirding, what I'm hearing described, what Crystal and Fabiola are describing, is a kind of revolutionary turn on its head. We haven't talked really as much about just the anti-nationalist, anti-colonial framework that the movement. I went to the website earlier today for the first time, and it's incredible. And so. I just want to say, in the future, going in the days ahead, we're going to be doing more of these kinds of broadcasts, and I hope y'all will join us again. I hope others that are listening, and maybe you are planning to do some actions and planning to bring people together in a physical space. Give us a note, drop us a note about that, and we can do more together. But I just want to thank you guys very much. I'm going to let the credits roll. I'm not sure why I was concerned about that when we were testing it out before, that the mic wasn't picking up on this last segment, but we'll roll the credits. Do you want to say anything before that drops, Crystal or Fabi, or are we good here?
Sure. I really appreciate all of you taking your time to hang out with us and explore this topic, and I'm looking forward to collaborating more. See you guys soon.
Yes. And stay connected. Share this project with your family, with your friends, with your neighbors. This is something that you can do at home. It's accessible, and let us know how it's going. Send us some messages, some pictures on Facebook, and please give us any suggestions. There's a lot of people that aren't able to access this live stream. We do intend on figuring out how to reach, stay connected, and fly.